Talofa lava, kia ora, e malole sui fu manuia. It's a beautiful morning here in
Yeah.
Portua. It's good to be home.
Okay. You were away last week, your trip to the Pacific. I'm not sure if this is the first time you go as a minister for Pacific people to the Pacific. How was it?
Yeah, so it's the first time I've been on any ministerial delegation as a minister.
Yeah.
Obviously, in my previous roles, I had accompanied other ministers across the world to for tax purposes and small business. But it was a very, very good trip. The people of the Solomons, Fiji, and Tonga were amazing, as you could appreciate, just like many of our Pacific family.
Yeah.
The Solomon Islands, in particular, was quite special for me. So my great grandfather Silangi is my Whaleaku side. He married my great grandmother Fakti,
Yeah.
who am I named after.
Yeah.
Now Silangi was from the Solomons, and if many can remember, there were a lot of Solomon Islanders that were sent to Samoa in the late 1800s, early 1900s for the copra plantations.
Yes.
And then what happened was they sent them back, but they sent a whole lot of them back and left, and they broke up the marriages and left their marriages and their families.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my grandma Fati obviously stayed back in Whareaku, remarried as well, but we lost the connection with our Solomon Island side because the records weren't good. And, back in those times, it was letters,
Yeah.
not, you can't just pick up the Facebook and do a FaceTime or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was in the Solomons, speaking to government officials there and lots of the locals, my great grandfather's name Silani is from the island of Malaita. So and the Malaysians were sent to Samoa around that time.
Yeah.
So we're one step closer for our family to finding out where we're from. We did a little bit of I did a little bit of media over there, and also it was a bit of media pickup because it's the first Solomon Islander MP and minister for a New Zealand government.
Wow.
So my hope is that through that process, myself and my uncle Osa Kitely, we can investigate even more how our Melanesian, our Solomon Island side, now that we have a place or an island where he is from.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, Honourable Minister, to us. I mean, our ainga is everything to us here. Okay, so the trip to the Pacific, what was the top agenda of the trip, Honourable Minister?
The trip to the Solomon Islands, Fiji, and Tonga was about reconnection. It is the first time that we've been able to do a Pacific Mission delegation since before COVID, since 2019. So it was about reconnecting with both the community and the leaders over there. We took a delegation with us of up to around 50 people of sort of Solomon Island, Fiji, Tongan. Of course, we always take our Samoans wherever we go. And it was to have bilaterals with the different government ministers across areas of importance like health. The Deputy Prime Minister Carmel Sepuloni led the delegation. She had bilaterals with the Solomon Islands Prime Minister, also with the Fijian Prime Minister, and myself had bilaterals with the Fijian Minister of Health, and then a number of the Deputy Prime Ministers of Fiji, because unfortunately the Prime Minister of Fiji was unwell at the time. But it really was about reconnecting, confirming the priorities for the Pacific, particularly around the health areas. New Zealand provides a huge amount of support through aid for programs over in the Pacific. So in the Solomon Islands, for example, I announced New Zealand funding into a Solomon Islands youth hub program. So that's to help, so that the Solomons has 70% of their population is aged 35 and under. So youth hub program was important as a safe youth hub for young people to come learn skills around trying to get employment, also around mental health. That was a big issue. So they had a lot of counsellors and social workers there. We also announced quite a large bit of our climate change financing. So when we were in Tonga, in Hatafu, which is one of the beach areas which was basically wiped out through the tsunami that happened as part of the as part of the Tongan volcano eruption. what we did is we announced some climate change funding so they could help them rebuild some of the planting that's needed for that area to strengthen the land. So New Zealand has obviously obligations to the Pacific to support our Pacific countries around climate change. That comes in the form of actually about 3 billion that was released, we announced last year, and about half of that will go to Pacific needs. So we did a number of announcements around climate change, but that's the number one priority for our Pacific neighbours is climate change and basically adapting and mitigating the effects of it, because they see that the impacts of climate change is already on their doorstep, and we see it here in New Zealand as well.
That's right.
I mean, just yesterday I was in Gisborne. I met with the Pacific Islanders Community Trust. This is in my associate recovery for cyclone recovery hat. And Gisborne's had 8 natural disasters since 2021. So they've had 2 cyclones this year. And it's very much, climate change is happening. And for New Zealand, we are now an island in the Pacific subject to cyclone season. So it's felt right throughout, and that was of huge importance to them.
Okay, Honourable Minister, if I may ask you, China's involvement in the Pacific, was there a chance to talk about it while you were in the Pacific, or?
No, it never came up formally in our bilaterals at all. The focus for us was our reconnection with the Pacific. Obviously, New Zealand has a special relationship, and that a large number of our familial ties, our families migrate from the Pacific here, work here, and just like my grandfather from the Solomons comes to family comes to New Zealand, and we marry through here, and we grow our roots here. So it wasn't a focus for us, and it didn't come up.
Okay. Lava Minister mo updated for the Pacific so okay. Talanoa nga agreement to Australia New Zealand. You are the Associate Minister of Immigration, Honourable Minister. Anything good? What do you think? Is it good for our Pacific people moving from New Zealand to Australia and vice versa?
Yeah, so I'm no longer the Associate Immigration Minister now. So 2 weeks ago, I was actually given the Minister for Economic Development. So that is a brand new portfolio for me. So as a result of that, I can't have 7 portfolios. I can't have all of them. So the Associate Immigration went to the new Minister, Rachel Brooking. But in general, I can speak to part of the New Zealanders in Australia have been asking for this support for a long time. They've migrated to Australia, again, grown their family there, have, basically paid their taxes in Australia. So they had been asking New Zealand to advocate for them with Australia for better rights for them. So you still have to meet the Australian criteria as to become a citizen, but the pathway is there. And what it means is that they can access better healthcare, access obviously, if appropriate, the superannuation. So there's a whole raft of changes that comes as part of it. But migration's always going to happen, whether it's to Australia. What actually was interesting in the Pacific is we're starting to see a flow back to the Pacific from people who've lived here, have basically built their wealth and their capacity, and are going back to either run businesses or back there to live with their families. So it's a two-way flow, and it's happening right across the Pacific. But for us, for the New Zealanders who are based in Australia, who are asking us to advocate them, this is a huge milestone. And it's there's been a number of governments who have tried to do that, and we've just managed to succeed under our Prime Minister Chris Hipkins.
Okay. Honourable Minister Barbara, Oil Associate Minister Economic Development and Internal Affairs. Can you share your thoughts on the report by Inland Revenue on taxes paid by the wealthy New Zealand?
Yeah, so for many people, well, obviously, I'm a tax lawyer by profession, so I've done tax policy and tax law for a long time. For many people who are probably within our industry, it's not a huge surprise. But what is a surprise is just how much. So what had happened was the Honourable David Parker, who's the Minister, had asked Inland Revenue to do some research. We had to change the law as part of it to ask these questions of citizens. So the data based on the full income information, so when we say income information, we're not just talking salary and wages, we're talking about income from all sources, so including capital gains, on equity or capital, on investments, so such as housing or if they own a company, etc. So the data based on that full income information of 311 of New Zealand's wealthiest citizens shows that the average person in this group pays what is an effective tax rate of 8.9% tax on their economic income. That's in contrast to, say, many New Zealanders who pay more than twice that rate. For example, someone who earns around a salary of $80,000 with no income pays 22% tax on that income, excluding GST. And the main difference is because the very wealthy earn only a small portion of their income from wages and salaries. Whereas for people that have wages and salaries, you get your tax taken before you get it in your pocket. Whereas for the wealthy, they don't. So it's an internationally significant piece of research because it uses real data. Other studies and other overseas studies have drawn on surveys or scenarios, but this has been actual research. So what this research will do now will just enable us now to have future discussions on tax policy. So we have an evidence base. Without the evidence base, it's very difficult to be able to have constructive discussions as well as design policy for the future. So now that it's been released, it also shows that we're going to have some thinking about it. There's no new taxes as part of this term of government, and like any government, every party, when you go to election, you go with a manifesto commitment. But just yesterday, the Prime Minister in his budget speech made it really clear that there's going to be no new taxes to pay for, say, the cyclone recovery, which we think can be up to $14 billion. But that this budget that's coming in a couple of weeks' time will be a very, very basic budget because we are working in very tight times. The government has to, tighten our own belts, and we have to be really careful and balance that against this. So there's quite a bit of need, not just with our people, but also with our infrastructure. So it's going to be a tight budget in a couple of weeks' time. And, I'll talk about that as we come closer to it.
Okay, good one. Very shortly, Honourable Minister, talking about the budget in a couple of weeks' time, Honourable Prime Minister Chris Hipkins already said no frills. What's your take on this? Can you elaborate a little bit on this, please?
Yeah, so exactly that. Liaise frills. It's not going to be one where you're going to have, huge government spending. But at the same time, I think it's important I always say the Minister of Peter Saul William Seal, when he was the Minister for Pacific Peoples, he's been our most successful Pacific Minister because of the amount of funding that he's been able to receive. But when he's received funding, it goes over 4 years. So, over $500 million of funding, over $500 million of funding towards Pacific initiatives, which he's managed to secure over his 5 years, that goes over that time. And what we will see is that actually it's not just this budget that's counted, but it's the previous budget. So it won't be one where there'll be big, what they'll say, big packages of, some people will say helicopter money, that sort of thing. But it'll be one about where we focus on what the greatest need is at the time. And off the back of a cyclone recovery, that's something that we need to concentrate on as part of our budget, of course.
Okay, Honourable Minister Barbara Edmonds, Whawhati Tele Lava, thank you so much for your time. And have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.